Worked with Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder.
And how did he repay you? He bought your songs.
Ah, you see?
Yeah, isn't that
I
nice?
couldn't take him anywhere. No, yes, I'm going to buy your songs, you know? And I went, yeah, great, good one, and we just carried on. And then a few weeks after that, he said, I'm going to buy your songs. I thought, well, it's a bit of an old joke by now, but very funny, all right? And he'd say, I'm going to get your records, I'm going to get your songs. I'm going to buy your songs.
Jackson had quietly outbid everyone, including McCartney himself, to take control of the most legendary music catalog in history. Songs like Hey Jude, Yesterday, and Let It Be. They now sent checks to Michael, not Paul. What started as a friendship built on music turned into a cold business move that ended it all. But why would the king of pop go after the Beatles' crown jewels? Was it revenge, genius, or something even deeper? Because the truth is, Michael didn't just buy a catalog, he bought power. And the full story? It's stranger than anyone expected. Section 1. A friendship turns business. Before the business, before the betrayal, there was friendship. In the early 1980s, Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson were closer than anyone expected. They were from different worlds, one a Beatle, the other a former Motown prodigy who had just launched into superstardom with Off the Wall. But music brought them together. Their chemistry was undeniable. The two recorded The Girl Is Mine in 1982, a playful duet that showed off their vocal charm. A year later, they teamed up again on Say, 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 which became a global smash. But what most fans didn't see was what happened between the sessions. Deep conversations about music, money, and the business side of things. Paul had already figured it out. While the world knew him as a songwriter and performer, he had quietly become a savvy music publisher. Over the years, he had purchased the rights to dozens, some say hundreds, of songs by other artists. From Buddy Holly to Broadway classics, Paul had built a portfolio that paid out royalties whether he was on stage or not. Michael was intrigued. He asked questions, he listened, and according to Paul, he even showed him a notebook filled with songs Paul owned. Paul chuckled and told him, "This is how you really make money in this business. You have to own the publishing." To Paul, it was casual advice between friends, something he offered freely, never imagining how seriously Michael was taking it. Because while Paul was talking about financial freedom, Michael was absorbing something else: power, ownership, legacy. And while that conversation may have ended with a handshake and a laugh, it planted a seed. A seed that would grow into one of the most shocking moves in music history. Just 2 years later, Michael saw an opportunity. And when he made his move, it didn't just change his life, it changed Paul's too. Section 2. The Beatles Catalogue was up for sale. The Beatles' music is sacred to millions. But for years, the ownership of that catalog was a legal mess. When John Lennon and Paul McCartney were just starting out, they had signed over their publishing rights to a company called Northern Songs. At the time, it was standard practice. No one thought twice about it. But it meant that the Beatles didn't actually control their own songs. Not Let It Be, not Hey Jude, not even Yesterday. Over time, Northern Songs changed hands. First to ATV Music, then to various corporate players, until eventually the rights to the Beatles' music were bundled into one giant catalog under ATV's control. By the mid-1980s, that catalog, containing not just the Beatles but thousands of other valuable songs, was quietly being shopped around. Michael Jackson had just come off the unimaginable success of Thriller. It wasn't just the best-selling album of the year, it became the best-selling album of all time. Michael was flush with cash and looking for his next move. He had already been advised by his lawyer and advisors to look into publishing investments, and that earlier conversation with Paul McCartney was still fresh in his mind. So when word came that the ATV music catalog was up for grabs, Michael didn't hesitate. He instructed his team to begin negotiations. His exact words, according to those close to him, were simple: "I want that." He knew what was inside that vault. He knew the value of a hard day's night, come together, and all you need is love. But more than anything, he knew this was a chance to own something nobody ever thought would be for sale. But Michael wasn't the only one watching. The moment the deal became public, others stepped in. And what happened next turned into one of the fiercest bidding wars the music industry had ever seen. Section 3. A Ruthless Bidding War. When word got out that ATV Music, the company holding the Beatles publishing, was up for sale, it was like blood in the water. Everyone wanted a piece. Billionaires, media moguls, even oil tycoons entered the race. But among all the sharks circling the deal, Michael Jackson was the one with the sharpest teeth. Michael's team entered negotiations quickly, backed by one of the toughest entertainment lawyers in the business, John Branca. They began serious talks with ATV's owner, Australian businessman Robert Holmes à Court. Holmes à Court had built his empire through ruthless corporate deals, and he knew exactly what this catalog was worth. He wasn't going to let it go for cheap. The bidding climbed fast. Initial offers were floated around $20 million. Within weeks, it was 30, then 35. Some offers came with strings attached, partial ownership, or licensing limits. Michael's offer was clear, simple, and bold. Total ownership, cash up front, and no compromise. And while Michael never told Paul McCartney he was bidding, sources say Paul's own representatives were exploring the same deal. Paul had tried in the past to regain control of the songs he helped write, but the complexity of corporate ownership and high prices kept him at arm's length. Then came the final blow. Michael outbid everyone with an offer of $47.5 million. Holmes à Court accepted. In 1985, the deal closed, and Michael Jackson became the owner of the Beatles' music. That wasn't just business, that was a seismic shift. One of the most iconic catalogs in the world was now in the hands of the king of pop. And he hadn't even told his friend Paul. The ink was dry, the songs were his. But when Paul found out, it wasn't just a surprise, it felt like betrayal. Section 4. McCartney's reaction was pure shock. When Paul McCartney learned that Michael Jackson had bought the Beatles' publishing rights, he was blindsided. This wasn't just a business deal, it was personal. The songs in that catalog weren't just valuable, they were pieces of Paul's soul. He'd written them with John Lennon, poured himself into every verse, every melody, and now he had to pay royalties to someone else, someone he once called a friend. In interviews afterward, Paul didn't hide his frustration. He said he felt misled. "I think it was dodgy," he admitted. He had never imagined Michael would be the one to swoop in and claim the rights. After all, hadn't he been the one who encouraged Michael to get into publishing in the first place? To Paul, it felt like betrayal. He had shared his wisdom openly, never thinking Michael would use it to gain leverage over his legacy. And the worst part? Michael never gave him a heads up. No call, no warning. Not even a conversation afterward. When Paul tried to reach out, he said his efforts went nowhere. "I wrote to him," Paul recalled. "I thought, Michael, look, this is wrong. I think I should have the songs." But Michael didn't budge. His response was short and direct. "It's just business." Those 3 words echoed like a slap. For Paul, this wasn't just about money. It was about heritage, identity, and trust. And for years after the deal, the two never collaborated again. The friendship that once produced global hits was gone, dismantled in a single transaction. But was it really just business? Or was Michael playing a much deeper game, one that would change the power dynamics of the entire music industry? Section 5. The business genius. Behind it. To the outside world, it looked like betrayal. But to Michael Jackson, it was the smartest business decision he ever made. He didn't just buy Beatles songs. He bought the entire ATV Music Catalogue, over 4,000 songs, spanning every genre and generation. Elvis Presley, Little Richard, the Rolling Stones, Bruce Springsteen. It was a goldmine of royalties. Every time a song played on the radio, appeared in a movie, or got covered by another artist, a payment rolled in. And now, those payments went to Michael Jackson. It wasn't about ego, it was about control. Michael had been burned before, by record labels, by managers, by people who saw him as a product rather than a person. This deal changed that. He wasn't just a performer anymore, he was an owner. Owning publishing meant security. It meant passive income. It meant that no matter what happened to album sales or touring schedules, he had a steady, unstoppable stream of revenue. Millions of dollars flowed in every year, quietly, consistently, and with almost no effort. Even more impressive? He held onto the catalog for years before making an even bolder move. In the mid-1990s, Michael agreed to merge ATV with Sony's publishing division. The result? A new company called Sony/ATV, one of the largest music publishing firms in the world. Section 6. The Fallout, and why it still matters. Michael Jackson's publishing empire was now a towering force. With Sony ATV in his hands, he didn't just own songs, he owned leverage. He had a seat at the table with the most powerful companies in music. And every time a Beatles track played during a commercial, a movie, or on the radio, Michael's share of the check rolled in. But with great control came mounting pressure. Behind the scenes, Michael was juggling an increasingly complex financial world. Lavish spending, legal battles, and media scrutiny were starting to weigh heavily. To keep things afloat, he eventually agreed to sell off parts of his empire. In 1995, he sold 50% of Sony ATV to Sony for $100 million. It was a massive deal, and it meant that Sony now had joint control of the catalog. Still, Michael remained a major player. But over the years, his influence within the partnership faded, especially as legal troubles and financial strain grew. After Michael's death in 2009, the battle over his assets intensified. His estate eventually sold off more of his publishing rights, and in 2016, Sony acquired full control of Sony ATV by buying out the Jackson estate's 50% share for $750 million. Meanwhile, Paul McCartney was still trying to reclaim his stake in the Beatles' legacy. Thanks to changes in US copyright law, he was finally able to begin the process of regaining his rights to some of his original compositions. But it was a long, slow road, and one that took decades to reach. What Michael had done wasn't just a power move, it set a precedent. Artists around the world began to realize the value of owning their work. The game had changed. But what if this wasn't just a strategic investment? What if Michael had motives no one expected? Section 7. Did Michael plan it all along? It's the question that still lingers decades later. Did Michael Jackson set out to buy the Beatles' music from the very beginning? Some believe the whole thing was a calculated move from the start. That from the moment Paul McCartney showed him his publishing catalog and explained the power behind it, Michael knew exactly what he wanted. Not just to be rich, but to be untouchable in the industry. To have something even the biggest legends didn't have: ownership. Others think it was more innocent, that Michael didn't fully grasp how deeply personal the Beatles catalog was to Paul. After all, Michael grew up in a different world, one where songs were often controlled by labels and executives. Maybe he saw it as just another business deal, not realizing the emotional stakes involved. But then there are the more cynical theories. Some insiders claimed that Michael's decision to outbid McCartney wasn't just about business, it was about status. For years, the Beatles had been the unshakable icons of popular music. By owning their catalog, Michael wasn't just making money, he was making a statement. He had surpassed them. Whether or not that's true, one thing is undeniable. The purchase gave Michael a level of influence that went far beyond the stage. He became a mogul in the truest sense. And for a black artist in a historically white-controlled industry, that was revolutionary. Still, the shadow of that deal never fully disappeared. The friendship was lost. The respect between two giants had been shaken. And for Paul, the wound took years to even begin to heal. So was it betrayal, brilliance, or something else entirely? Because what Michael pulled off didn't just change his relationship with Paul, it changed the music business. Michael Jackson turned a simple conversation into one of the most legendary power moves in music history. He bought the crown jewels of pop culture, not out of spite, but out of strategy. Or was it more than that? For Paul McCartney, it was a painful reminder that even friends can become rivals in the world of business. For Michael, it was about ownership, control, and rewriting the rules of the industry. Was it ruthless? Was it genius? Or was it both? You decide. Let us know in the comments. Was Michael wrong to do it? Or was he simply playing a smarter game? And if you enjoyed this story, check out our deep dive on how Michael Jackson's Off the Wall became the perfect debut album.